The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Dr. Sarah Chen didn't notice. Her eyes remained fixed on the quantum computer's display, watching numbers cascade across the screen in patterns that shouldn't exist. Outside her lab window, Boston's skyline glittered under a November moon, but inside this cramped room at MIT, reality itself was beginning to crack. "This can't be right," she whispered, running the simulation for the 14th time. The results stayed stubbornly identical. Her colleague, Marcus Webb, leaned over her shoulder, his reflection ghostly in the monitor's glow. "What am I looking at, Sarah?" "Proof," she said quietly. "Actual, measurable proof that parallel worlds exist." Marcus laughed, but the sound died quickly when he saw her face. "You're serious." "Dead serious. Look at this quantum interference pattern." She pointed to a series of wave formations on the screen. "We're not just seeing particles behaving like they exist in multiple states. We're seeing them receiving information from versions of themselves in other realities. The experiment had started simply enough 3 months ago. Sarah's team had been testing quantum entanglement at scales never attempted before, trying to prove that information could be preserved across quantum events. What they discovered instead was far more extraordinary. The entangled particles weren't just connected to each other. They were connected to infinite versions of themselves across infinite realities. Marcus pulled up a chair, his skepticism warring with curiosity. "Walk me through it." Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up data streams. Every quantum event creates a branch point. Every decision, every particle interaction, every possible outcome actually happens. Most scientists have treated the many worlds interpretation as elegant mathematics, nothing more. But Marcus, we're seeing the evidence. These particles are communicating across world lines. That's impossible. The math says each universe should be completely isolated. The math we've been using, yes. But what if we've been thinking about it wrong? Sarah stood, pacing the small lab like a caged animal. What if the barriers between worlds aren't absolute? What if they're more like membranes, and under the right conditions, information can leak through? She pulled up another screen, this one showing a complex web of interconnected nodes. "I've been mapping the decision points. Every time we run the experiment and make a choice about which measurement to take, the data shows echoes. Echoes, Marcus. Like our decision is rippling across neighboring realities where we made different choices." Marcus studied the screen, his face growing pale. "If you're right, if this is real, do you understand what this means? Every choice we've ever made, every path we didn't take, it all exists. Somewhere out there, there's a version of me who didn't come to MIT, a version who took that job in California, a version who died in that car accident you barely avoided 5 years ago." Sarah finished softly. "Yes, and a version who never got in the car at all. Infinite variations, infinite lives, all equally real. The weight of it settled over them like a physical thing." Marcus sat down heavily, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "How do we prove it? How do we show this to the world?" "That's where it gets complicated." Sarah returned to her computer, pulling up a new set of files. "I've been working on something. A device that could potentially amplify these quantum signals. If the barriers between worlds are permeable at the quantum level, maybe we can strengthen that connection. Maybe we can actually observe other realities directly." "That sounds dangerous." "It's terrifying," Sarah admitted. "But think about what we could learn. Every great mind that ever lived, every problem ever solved, every mistake ever made. It's all out there accessible. We could learn from infinite versions of ourselves." Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah barely slept. The device took shape in her lab, a strange amalgamation of quantum processors, electromagnetic field generators, and experimental sensors. Marcus helped, though his enthusiasm was tempered with growing unease. "You're obsessed," he said one night, finding her in the lab at 3 a.m. "I'm dedicated," she corrected, soldering a connection with steady hands despite her exhaustion. "There's a difference between dedication and obsession, Sarah. When was the last time you went home? When did you last eat something that wasn't from the vending machine?" She set down the soldering iron, meeting his eyes. "How can I sleep knowing what we discovered? Every minute I waste, There's a version of me out there who's already completed this work, a version who's already made contact. I can't be the one who failed because I needed 8 hours of sleep. Listen to yourself. You're competing with infinite versions of yourself. That's a race you can't win. But Sarah wasn't listening. The device was nearly complete, and with it, the possibility of something humanity had dreamed about for centuries. Proof of other worlds. Proof that death wasn't an ending but a branching. Proof that every regret existed in a world where things turned out differently. The night they activated the device, only Sarah and Marcus were present. The rest of the department had gone home, unaware of the experiment about to take place. Sarah had kept the project quiet, knowing the scrutiny it would face before they had results. "Ready?" she asked, her finger hovering over the activation switch. Marcus checked the readings one last time. All systems green. "Sarah, before you do this, are you absolutely sure? We don't know what this might do. What if opening a connection affects both sides?" "Then we'll be careful," she said, and pressed the button. The device hummed to life, a sound that seemed to vibrate in the bones rather than the ears. The quantum processors began their calculations, and the electromagnetic fields pulsed in precise patterns. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air itself seemed to shimmer. Sarah gasped as images flickered into existence around the lab. Not solid, not quite holographic, but their ghostly impressions of other spaces, other times. She saw herself standing at the same console, but her hair was different, shorter. Another version appeared, older, with gray streaking through her dark hair. Then another, younger, laughing at something outside the frame. "My God," Marcus breathed. "It's working. We're seeing them. We're actually seeing other worlds." The visions multiplied, layering over each other like translucent sheets. Sarah saw herself giving a presentation to a packed auditorium. She saw herself sitting in a jail cell, face bruised and defeated. She saw herself holding a baby, tears of joy streaming down her face. She saw herself lying in a hospital bed, machines beeping a final rhythm. "Turn it off," Marcus said suddenly, his voice sharp with fear. "Sarah, turn it off now." But she couldn't move. The visions were overwhelming, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. She saw every choice, every consequence, every possible path her life could have taken. Joy and horror, triumph and tragedy, all existing simultaneously across the infinite canvas of reality. Then something changed. One of the visions solidified, becoming clearer than the others. It was her, but different. This version's eyes held a hardness, a determination that bordered on madness. And this other Sarah was looking directly at her. "No!" Marcus shouted, lunging for controls. But before he could reach them, the device surged with power it wasn't designed to handle. Sparks flew from the circuits. The air crackled with energy. The other Sarah smiled, and Sarah felt information pouring into her mind. Not words, not images, but pure knowledge flowing across a dimensional barrier. She understood in that instant what her other self had discovered. This other Sarah had activated her device first, had been searching the infinite worlds, looking for something, looking for a way through. "She wants to cross over," Sarah heard herself say, though she didn't remember choosing to speak. "She's been trying to find a reality where the barriers are weak enough, where someone was foolish enough to open a door from the other side." The device exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Sarah was thrown backward, hitting the wall hard enough to knock the breath from her lungs. Marcus stumbled, falling to his knees. The visions vanished, leaving only the smoking ruins of their work and the acrid smell of burnt electronics. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Marcus crawled to Sarah's side, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, though every part of her body ached. "I'm fine. The device is destroyed, along with months of work." He sat back, running shaking hands through his hair. "What the hell was that? That other version of you. She was trying to come here. Why?" Sarah stood slowly, leaning against a wall for support. Her mind was still reeling from the connection, from the flood of knowledge that had passed between worlds. Because in her world, she made different choices. Worse choices. She's trying to escape the consequences. Can she? Can people actually cross between worlds? I don't know. The math says no, that each observer is locked to their own reality. But the math also said we couldn't see other worlds, and we just did. We barely understand any of this. Marcus looked at the wreckage of their experiment, his expression haunted. Maybe we're not supposed to understand it. Maybe there are some doors that should stay closed. But Sarah wasn't listening. She was thinking about what she'd seen, what she'd felt in that moment of connection. The other version of herself wasn't just trying to escape. She was trying to take over, to replace the Sarah of this world with herself. And somewhere out there, across the infinite expanse of parallel realities, that other Sarah was still searching, still trying. The next morning, Sarah drafted a report for her department head. She described the experiment, the results, and the catastrophic failure that had destroyed their equipment. She left out the visions, the moment of contact, the terrifying knowledge that they had been seen by something on the other side. Why aren't you telling them everything? Marcus asked as he read over her shoulder. Because they'll either think I'm crazy or they'll want to rebuild the device. Probably both. She saved the file, then encrypted it with passwords within passwords. We need time to understand what happened, time to figure out the implications. The implication is that parallel worlds exist, and we just proved it. No, Sarah said quietly. The implication is that parallel worlds exist, and some of the people in them want what we have. They want our world, our life, and we just showed them it might be possible. Over the following weeks, Sarah tried to return to normal research. She taught her classes, reviewed papers, attended faculty meetings. But at night, alone in her apartment, she dreamed of other Sarahs. She saw them in infinite variety, making infinite choices, living infinite lives. And in every dream, one version stood out, the one who would look through the barrier with hungry, desperate eyes. Marcus noticed a change in her. You're not sleeping, he said over coffee one afternoon. I sleep fine. You're lying. I can see it in your face. What's wrong? She wanted to tell him, wanted to explain that she felt watched, that sometimes when she caught her reflection in a window or mirror, she could have sworn the reflection moved slightly wrong, like it wasn't quite in sync. But that would sound insane. I'm fine, she insisted, just thinking about the next phase of research. There is no next phase. The device is destroyed, remember? And even if we could rebuild it, should we? After what happened? Sarah had no answer for that. The scientist in her wanted to rebuild, to push forward, to understand. But a deeper, more primal part of her wanted to run. Wanted to pretend the experiment had never happened, that the barriers between worlds were absolute and impenetrable. But she knew the truth now. The barriers were thin. Information could cross them. And if information could cross, what else might follow? 3 months after the failed experiment, Sarah received a package at her office. No return address. No indication of who had sent it. Inside was a hard drive containing terabytes of data. Research notes, equations, experimental results. All of it focused on the same thing that had consumed her recent work, the study of parallel worlds. She plugged the drive into an isolated computer, one not connected to any network. The files opened, revealing research that went far beyond what her team had accomplished. Whoever had compiled this had been working on the problem for years, maybe decades. They had theories about the nature of the barriers, about how they might be breached, about what might be found on the other side. At the bottom of the directory, she found a video file. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Her own face filled the screen. But not her. Another version. The one with the hard, hungry eyes from the vision. Hello, Sarah. The other said, by now, you've realized what we discovered. The barriers are thin. Thinner than anyone imagined. I've spent 20 years in my world studying them, learning how they work, how they can be manipulated. I've seen things you can't imagine. Worlds where humanity died out centuries ago. Worlds where we never left the trees. Worlds where everything is slightly, perfectly better than what we have. I'm trapped in a dying world, Sarah. We made mistakes here. Terrible mistakes. The climate collapsed, the oceans rose, and now we're facing extinction. But I found a way out. A way to reach across the infinite and touch other worlds. Your world. I'm coming, Sarah. One way or another, I'm going to find a way to cross over. And when I do, one of us will get to stay. The other will have to go. Think of it as natural selection on a multiversal scale. Only the strongest, the smartest, the most determined version gets to survive. I've been preparing for this my whole life. Have you? The video ended, leaving Sarah staring at a black screen. She ejected the drive with shaking hands, then destroyed it, smashed it with a hammer until it was fragments and dust. But the damage was done. The message had been received. Somewhere across the infinite expanse of parallel worlds, another version of herself was coming, and Sarah had no idea how to stop her. That night, she sat in her darkened apartment, staring out at the city lights. Marcus had been right. Some doors should stay closed. Some knowledge was too dangerous to pursue. But it was too late for regrets now. The door had been opened. The barrier had been breached, even if only for a moment. And in that moment, they had been seen. Sarah picked up her phone and called Marcus. "I need your help," she said when he answered. "I need to understand what we did, how we made contact, because if we could do it from this side, she can do it from hers. Sarah, she's coming, Marcus. And when she gets here, only one of us can stay. I need to be ready." There was a long silence. Then Marcus sighed. "I'll be at the lab in an hour. Bring everything you have." They worked through the night, reconstructing the theory behind their device. If Sarah's other self could cross the barrier, there had to be a way to detect it, to stop it, or so they hoped. As dawn broke over Boston, Sarah stood at her lab window, watching the city wake. Somewhere out there, in an infinite array of parallel realities, other Sarahs were waking too, making breakfast, going to work, living their lives. Most of them would never know about the barriers between worlds, never imagine the infinite variations of themselves stretching across reality. But Sarah knew, and knowing changed everything. Because if parallel worlds were real, then nothing was certain. Every choice split reality, creating new branches, new possibilities. The life she was living was just one path among infinite paths. The person she was existed in infinite variations. And one of those variations was coming to take her place. Sarah turned back to her computer, to the equations and theories spreading across the screen. She had made a discovery that would change humanity's understanding of reality. But she had also made an enemy with her face, her mind, her determination, an enemy from a parallel world. The coffee maker beeped, fresh and hot. Sarah poured a cup, her hand steady despite everything. If her other self wanted a war across dimensions, Sarah would give her one. She had proven parallel worlds existed. Now she would prove they could defend the weeks that followed transformed Sarah Chun into someone she barely recognized. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford, replaced by countless hours spent decoding the research from a mysterious hard drive before she had destroyed it. But Sarah had been clever. Before smashing the device to pieces, she had copied everything to an encrypted server, hidden behind layers of security that even the most sophisticated hacker would struggle to penetrate. Marcus had become her constant companion in this descent into obsession. Together, they pored over the equations and theories that the other Sarah had developed. The mathematics was elegant, terrifying in its implications. The other Sarah hadn't just theorized about crossing between worlds. She had found a way to do it. "Look at this," Marcus said one evening, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. He pointed to a complex diagram on the screen, a web of intersecting lines, and nodes that looked more like abstract art than physics. "She's mapped the weak points, places where the barriers between realities are thinnest. And Sarah, look at this coordinate." Sarah leaned closer, her heart sinking as she recognized the location. "That's here. That's MIT. That's this building. Not just this building. This lab, this exact location, in space-time." Marcus sat back, rubbing his eyes. "She's not coming randomly. She's been targeting this spot specifically, the place where you first opened the door." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The other Sarah had spent 20 years preparing for this moment. She had studied the barriers, mapped the weak points, calculated the exact conditions needed to cross over. And Sarah, in her naive curiosity, had opened a door at the precise location where the barriers were weakest. She had practically sent out an invitation. "We need to set up sensors," Sarah said, her voice taking on commanding tone that Marcus had learned meant she had formulated a plan. "If she's going to cross over here, there will be quantum fluctuations, distortions in the local field. We might not be able to stop her, but we can at least know when she's coming." They worked with renewed urgency, installing detection equipment throughout the lab, quantum field sensors, electromagnetic monitors, even modified Geiger counters that might pick up the radiation signature of a dimensional breach. The equipment crowded every available surface, turning the lab into a makeshift fortress against an invasion from another reality. 2 weeks later, at precisely 3:17 in the morning, every alarm went off simultaneously. Sarah bolted upright from the cot she had set up in the corner of the lab. Marcus, who had been dozing at his workstation, nearly fell from his chair. The sensors were going haywire, needles slamming against their maximum readings, digital displays flickering with numbers that climbed into impossible ranges. "She's here," Sarah whispered, though the word was barely audible over the screaming alarms. "She's actually doing it." The air in the center of the lab began to shimmer, the same effect they had seen during their first experiment, but stronger, more focused. Reality itself seemed to thin, like fabric stretched too tight. Through the distortion, Sarah could see another lab, one that looked identical to hers, but subtly wrong. The equipment was more advanced, the walls scarred with burn marks and hastily repaired damage. And standing in the center of that other lab, surrounded by machinery that glowed with an eerie blue light, was her, the other Sarah. She looked older than Sarah remembered from the video. Lines of stress and determination carved deep into her face. Her hair streaked with more gray than Sarah's own, but her eyes were the same. Hard, hungry, desperate. The eyes of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. "Hello, Sarah," the other version said, her voice echoing strangely as it crossed the dimensional barrier. "I told you I was coming." Sarah stepped forward, positioning herself between the distortion and Marcus. "You can't do this. You can't just take over someone else's life." The other Sarah laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. "Can I? Watch me. I've spent 2 decades working on this problem, while my world died around me. Do you know what it's like to watch everything you love turn to ash? To know that you could have prevented it if you just made different choices. So you're going to steal my life instead? I'm going to take what I deserve, what I earned through years of sacrifice and study." The other Sarah's hand moved to a control panel in her world, her fingers dancing over the surface. "You opened the door, Sarah. You invited me in. All I'm doing is accepting your invitation." The shimmer intensified, the barrier between worlds growing thinner. Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm, pulling her back. "We need to go. We need to get out of here now." But Sarah didn't move. She understood something in that moment, something fundamental about the nature of the barriers between worlds. The other Sarah couldn't just cross over. She needed someone on this side to complete the connection. She needed Sarah. "You can't do it alone," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "You need me to open the door from this side. That's why you sent the hard drive. That's why you've been showing me how to detect the crossing. You need my help." The other Sarah's expression flickered, a moment of uncertainty crossing her face before the mask of determination returned. "Smart girl. Smarter than I gave you credit for. Yes, I need you to complete the final calculation. I need you to input the resonance frequency that will align our 2 realities long enough for me to cross over. And if I refuse, then I'll try again, and again, and again. I have infinite patience, Sarah. I have nothing but time. Eventually, you'll make a mistake. Eventually, you'll input the wrong equation or run the wrong experiment, and you'll open the door wide enough for me to slip through. It could take months or years, but it will happen." Sarah looked at the equations displayed on her computer screen, the ones she and Marcus had been working on for weeks. Without realizing it, they had been building the very key the other Sarah needed. She had been guiding them, leaving clues in the research data, pushing them toward the solution. Sarah had been played, but even as that realization settled over her, another thought emerged. If the other Sarah needed her help to cross over, that meant Sarah had power. The power to refuse. The power to close the door permanently. Marcus, Sarah said quietly, not taking her eyes off her other self. Remember that failsafe we discussed? The one that would seal the quantum field and prevent any further dimensional breaches. She felt Marcus stiffen beside her. They had theorized about such a mechanism, a way to permanently stabilize the barriers between worlds. But it would require an enormous amount of energy. Energy that would have to come from somewhere. Sarah, no, that would require. I know what would require. She finally turned to look at Marcus, seeing the understanding and horror in his eyes. It's the only way. If I don't close the door now, she'll keep trying. She'll eventually find another Sarah, one desperate enough or foolish enough to help her. This is the end here. The other Sarah's eyes widened as she realized what Sarah was planning. Don't you dare close that door. This is my only chance. My world is dead, Sarah. Dead. Everyone I loved is gone. I deserve to live. I deserve to survive. Maybe you do, Sarah said softly, but not at the cost of my world. Not at the cost of everyone I love. She turned to the console, her fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced precision. The equations flowed from her memory, the same ones she had studied for weeks without fully understanding their purpose. Now she saw the pattern, saw how they fit together. The failsafe would work, but it would require channeling the quantum field through a living observer. Through her. Sarah, please. Marcus grabbed her shoulder, trying to pull her away from the computer. There has to be another way. Let me do it. Let me be the one. She shook her head, gently removing his hand. It has to be me. She's connected to me. Our quantum signatures are entangled across realities. That's the only reason this even works. You can't substitute yourself. It has to be a Sarah-chan. Through the dimensional barrier, the other Sarah had stopped trying to complete her crossing. She stood frozen, watching as Sarah worked. You're going to kill yourself, she said, her voice barely a whisper. You're going to sacrifice everything just to keep me out. No, Sarah corrected, her hands never stopping their work. I'm going to sacrifice everything to protect my world, to protect everyone in it, including all the other versions of me out there who might have faced the same choice you made. I'm making sure no one else has to die because we opened a door we didn't understand. The equations were complete. Sarah looked at the screen one final time, double-checking every variable, every constant. It would work. The quantum field would collapse in on itself, using her consciousness as a focal point. The barriers between worlds would stabilize, becoming truly impermeable. No more leaks. No more crossings. No more doors. But Sarah-chan would be gone. She thought about the life she was giving up, the research she would never complete, the discoveries she would never make, the love she might have found, the children she might have had, the impact she might have left on the world. All of it traded for the safety of everyone else. It seemed like a fair exchange. I'm sorry, she said to Marcus, who had tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry I have to ask you to be the one who survives this. But someone needs to tell the story. Someone needs to make sure people know what we discovered and why it has to stay hidden. I can't do this without you, Marcus said, his voice breaking. Yes, you can. You're stronger than you think, than I ever gave you credit for. She managed a small smile. Take care of this world for me, Marcus. Make sure it stays worth saving. She turned back to the screen and reached for the enter key. Wait. The other Sarah's voice cut through the moment. Sarah looked up to see her counterpart's face twisted with emotion, anger, regret, desperation, and something that might have been respect. You're really going to do it. You're really going to die to stop me. Yes. That makes you either the bravest person I've ever met or the stupidest. The other Sarah's laugh was bitter. I spent 20 years trying to survive, and you're throwing your life away in 20 seconds. I don't understand you. You don't have to understand, Sarah replied. You just have to accept it. This door is closing. Forever. Will it hurt? The question caught Sarah off guard. She saw, for just a moment, the fear beneath her counterpart's anger. The other Sarah wasn't just trying to escape a dying world. She was running from death itself, and Sarah was forcing her to face it. "I don't know," Sarah answered honestly, "but I think it'll be quick. For both of us." "Both of us." Sarah nodded. "The quantum entanglement goes both ways. When I collapse the field here, it'll create a resonance wave that travels back through connection. It'll hit your device on the other side. You might want to step away from it." For a long moment, the two Sarahs stared at each other across the dimensional divide. Mirrors of each other, reflections of what might have been. Two versions of the same person who had made different choices, walked different paths, and arrived at this impossible moment. "I hate you," the other Sarah whispered. "I know. I'm sorry." "No, you're not." Sarah considered this. "No, I'm not. I'm sorry your world died. I'm sorry you suffered. But I'm not sorry for protecting mine." The other Sarah nodded slowly, accepting the truth of it. If there's an afterlife, some place where all the different versions of us end up, I'm going to find you, and I'm going to punch you in the face. Despite everything, Sarah laughed. "I'll be waiting." She pressed the enter key. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The quantum field collapsing on itself, reality folding like a sheet of paper crumpling. Sarah felt her consciousness expand and contract simultaneously, stretched across dimensions as the barriers between worlds solidified. She saw infinite versions of herself in infinite realities, all living their lives, all unaware of what was happening. And she saw the other Sarah, standing in her dying world, watching as the device around her exploded in a shower of sparks and light. For one impossible moment, Saracen existed everywhere and nowhere. She was the quantum field, the observer and the observed, the question and the answer. She understood, in that brief eternity, the true nature of reality, infinite possibilities, infinite choices, infinite lives, all branching from the same root. And she understood why the barriers between worlds had to remain closed, because some doors, once open, could never be fully shut again. Some knowledge came with a price, and someone had to pay it. The light faded. The quantum field stabilized. The dimensional barrier sealed itself with a finality that echoed across all of reality. And in a cramped lab in MIT, Marcus Webb caught Sarah Chun as she collapsed, her body going limp in his arms. "Sarah? Sarah, please, stay with me. Don't you dare die on me." But Sarah didn't respond. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. The monitors around them showed her vital signs dropping rapidly. The quantum field had taken everything she had to give and more. Marcus cradled her in his arms. This brilliant woman who had discovered the truth about parallel worlds and paid the ultimate price to protect her own. He thought about calling for help, but he knew it was too late. The damage wasn't physical. It was something deeper, something that existed at the quantum level of her being. Sarah Chun had scattered herself across infinite realities to seal the barriers between them, and there wasn't enough left of her in this world to survive. "I'll tell them," Marcus whispered, his tears falling on her face. "I'll tell them what you did, what you discovered, what you sacrificed. I promise, Sarah, I promise." Her lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Marcus leaned closer, straining to catch them. "Worth it," she breathed. "Parallel worlds are real. Tell them everything." And then she was gone. 6 months later, Marcus Webb stood before a packed auditorium at MIT. The lecture hall was filled to capacity, with people standing in the aisles and crowding around the doors. They had come to hear about Dr. Sarah Chen's final discovery, the breakthrough that had cost her life. Marcus had spent those 6 months preparing this presentation, carefully constructing a narrative that honored Sarah's work, while omitting the most dangerous details. He told them about the quantum entanglement experiments, about the evidence for parallel worlds existing in a real, measurable way. He showed them Sarah's equations, her theories, her brilliant insights into the nature of reality. But he didn't tell them about the device. He didn't mention the dimensional barriers that could be breached, the other Sarah who had tried to cross over, or the terrible choice his friend had made. That knowledge died with Sarah, locked away in encrypted files that Marcus would take to his own grave. Dr. Chen believed that understanding parallel worlds wasn't just about the physics. Marcus said, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium. It was about understanding ourselves. Every choice we make creates new branches, new possibilities. We live in just one reality out of infinite realities, and that makes every moment precious. Every decision matters. Every life has value because it's the only one we get in this particular world. He clicked to the final slide, a photograph of Sarah taken in the lab, her face lit up with the excitement of discovery. She looked young in the picture, full of hope and possibility, before she knew the cost of her curiosity. Sarah Chun proved that parallel worlds are real, Marcus continued. But more than that, she proved that our world, the specific branch of reality, is worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth dying for. He paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. She gave her life to protect ours. And I think that tells us something important about the nature of existence. We're not just observers of reality. We're participants. We're guardians. And sometimes we have to make impossible choices to keep the world we love safe. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. Marcus stood there, accepting their applause on Sarah's behalf, wishing she could be there to see it, wishing she could know that her sacrifice had mattered, that her work would be remembered, that her name would be spoken with reverence by physicists for generations to come. After the presentation, as the crowd filed out, a young graduate student approached Marcus. She had Sarah's same intensity in her eyes, that same hunger for knowledge that had driven Sarah to the edge of reality and beyond. "Dr. Webb," she said hesitantly, "I've read all of Dr. Chen's published papers. Her work was brilliant, but I can't help feeling like there's something missing, something she discovered but never wrote down." Marcus looked at her carefully, seeing the echo of his friend in this young woman's determination. "Sarah discovered many things," he said slowly. "Not all of them were meant to be shared. But science is about sharing knowledge, about pushing the boundaries of what we understand. Science is also about responsibility," Marcus replied, "about knowing when a door should remain closed." Sarah understood that. She understood it better than anyone. He placed a hand on the student's shoulder, feeling the weight of his promise to Sarah. Some discoveries are dangerous. Some knowledge comes with a price that's too high to pay. Sarah paid that price, so no one else would have to. The least we can do is honor her choice. The student looked disappointed, but nodded. "I understand. But if there are dangers out there, shouldn't we know about them? Shouldn't we be prepared?" Marcus thought about the other Sarah, trapped in her dying world, desperate enough to try anything to escape. He thought about the dimensional barriers, thin and permeable, waiting for someone foolish enough to breach them again. He thought about infinite realities stretching out into eternity, some of them paradise, some of them hell, all of them existing simultaneously. And he thought about Sarah Chun, who had looked into that infinite abyss and chosen to close her eyes forever to keep everyone else safe. "The best preparation," he said finally, "is to make sure we never need it, to make choices that keep our world from becoming the kind of place someone would want to escape from. That's